There's a drive. 45 minutes. Colorado. August. The sun just starting to bleed over the horizon, that particular shade of orange that makes everything look like it's on fire. Chris Watts is behind the wheel. His work truck moves through the early morning like nothing is wrong. Like he's just a guy heading to a long day at the oil fields. The kind of guy who coaches Little League. Who fixes the neighbor's fence. Who posts photos of his daughters on Instagram with the caption, "My whole world." His whole world is in this truck. His wife, Shanann, 34 years old, 15 weeks pregnant, is in the back. His daughters, Bella and Celeste, 4 years old and 3, are in the back seat. They're alive. They're holding each other. And Chris Watts is just driving. This is not a story about a monster. Monsters are easy. Monsters have red eyes and no soul, and you can spot them from across the street. This is a story about a mask. And the 48 hours it took for it to finally fall off. If you scrolled through Shanann Watts' Instagram in the summer of 2018, you'd see exactly what she wanted you to see. A beautiful home in Frederick, Colorado. A handsome husband. 2 little girls, Bella in her purple dress, Cece making faces at the camera. A baby on the way. A life that looked like the kind people pin on vision boards. Chris Watts was 33 years old. He worked for an oil and gas company called Anadarko Petroleum. He was quiet. He was polite. He was, by every neighbor's account, a good guy. The kind of man who waves at you from the driveway. The kind of man you never think about twice. But underneath the Instagram posts, underneath the family barbecues and the birthday parties, something had been rotting for months. Chris Watts had met someone. Her name was Nicole Kessinger. A coworker. And by the summer of 2018, he wasn't just having an affair. He was building a second life. He was Googling how to tell if you're in love. He was texting her while Shanann texted him about their marriage counseling. He had started to see his own family, the girls, the pregnancy, the house, not as his life, but as an obstacle. And here's where the story gets cold. Because Chris Watts didn't snap. He didn't lose control. He made a decision. On the night of August 12, 2018, Shanann came home from a business trip. It was late. The girls were asleep. They talked. About the marriage. About the separation Shanann had been considering. About what came next. Chris Watts had already decided what came next. Sometime between 2 and 4 in the morning, while Bella and Celeste slept down the hall, he strangled his wife. In their bed. There were no defensive wounds on him. Forensic experts believe she may have been asleep before she could fight back. By 5:17 a.m., he was loading her body into his truck. He woke the girls. He got them dressed. He put them in the back seat. And he drove. 45 minutes. With his dead wife. And his living daughters. And the Colorado sun coming up like nothing had happened. But what Chris Watts didn't know, is that someone was already watching. August 13th. Early afternoon. Frederick, Colorado. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone. Where the driveways are clean and the kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. Shanann's friend, Nicole Atkinson, had called the police that morning. Shanann had a doctor's appointment. She hadn't shown up. She wasn't answering her phone. She wasn't answering her door. For Nicole, who knew Shanann, that was enough. Officers arrived at the house. Chris Watts was already there. And from the very first second, something was wrong. He wasn't acting like a man whose pregnant wife and 2 toddlers had vanished. He was acting like a man who was late for a meeting. He was scrolling through his phone. He was talking too much, filling every silence with words that didn't quite land right. He kept saying he hoped they were at a neighbor's house. In true crime, there's a concept called duper's delight. That involuntary flash, barely a second, where a liar's face betrays the thrill of thinking they're getting away with it. Watch the body cam footage. It's there. Officer Coonrod had a lead. A neighbor, Nate Stick, had a security camera mounted on his garage. High definition. Facing the street. And it had been recording since before 5 a.m. The three of them went into Nate's garage. Chris Watts. Officer Coonrod. Nate. Nate hit play. On the small monitor, the world turned black and white. 5:17 a.m. A white work truck. Backing up. All the way to the garage door. Slowly. Deliberately. Now look at Chris. In the body cam footage, captured at the exact same moment, you see it happen in real time. He stops looking at his phone. He leans in toward the screen. And then, both hands go up to the top of his head. Not in grief. Not in relief. In the silent, full-body recognition of a man who just realized he's been caught. Because Nate's camera didn't just capture the truck. It captured the fact that no one else ever left that house. No Shanann. No Bella. No Cece. Just Chris. Loading something heavy into the back of his truck. In the dark. At 5 a.m. When Chris finally leaves the garage, Nate leans over to Officer Coonrod and says something quiet. 7 words that would crack this case open. He's not acting right. He's fidgety. He never talks that much. The neighbors always know. They see the patterns. They notice when the nice guy starts performing. And in that dark garage, in front of a flickering screen, the performance of Chris Watts finally started running out of time. But the real unraveling? That happened 2 days later. In a room with no windows. August 15th. The Frederick Police Department. The room is small. The walls are painted a depressing shade of eggshell. 3 people. 1 lie. And a polygraph machine that doesn't care about your feelings. On one side of the table, CBI agent Tammy Lee and FBI agent Graham Coder. They are calm. They are patient. They have the video. On the other side, Chris Watts. He's wearing a t-shirt. He's leaning back. He still thinks he can talk his way out of this. He has been talking his way out of things his entire life. The detectives don't start with the footage. That would be a rookie mistake. Instead, they start with the relationship. Tammy Lee leans forward. Warm. Measured. Like she's on his side. Tammy Lee, Chris, we know things were hard. We know Shanann could be difficult. We know you're a good guy who just reached his limit. This is called the empathy trap. They give him a villain to blame, his own wife. They hand him a bridge to a confession and make it feel like the honorable thing to do. And Chris, who has spent 33 years desperately needing to be the nice guy. He starts to walk across it. But then the temperature changes. Agent Lee mentions the polygraph results. Chris had scored a -18. For context, anything below -4 is considered deceptive. He sat in that room for 7 hours. Sweating through his shirt. While a woman calmly, methodically told him that his own body was betraying him. And then she said the word. Not killer. Not murderer. She called him a liar. And for a man who had spent his entire life performing the role of the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect neighbor. That word cut deeper than anything else she could have said. Watch the footage. His leg is bouncing like a piston under the table. He keeps rubbing the back of his neck, a biological self-soothing response. The body trying to comfort itself when the mind is coming apart. And then Agent Lee does something precise. Tammy Lee, Chris. The truck. We saw it on Nate's camera. We saw you loading something. And we know no one else came out. Only you. So, what was in the truck, Chris? In a script, silence is louder than a scream. Chris Watts looks at the floor. And then he asks for his father. Ronnie. This is the most human, and most revealing, moment of the entire interrogation. He can't admit this to a woman. He can't let her see what he is. He needs his father to walk into that room and tell him it's okay. He needs, one last time, to be the good son. Ronnie enters. And Chris whispers the first of many truths. I killed her, Dad. She did something to the girls, and I strangled her. It was a lie inside a confession. A shadow truth, him still casting himself as the hero of his own story. The protector. The father who snapped because he had to. But the detectives just nodded. Because once you get a man to admit to one body, the rest is only a matter of time. The full truth wouldn't come for another 6 months. And when it did, it was worse than anyone imagined. February 18, 2019. Dodge Correctional Institution, Wisconsin. Chris Watts isn't wearing a Best Dad t-shirt anymore. He's in a tan prison jumpsuit. He's been sitting in a cell with his thoughts and a Bible for 6 months. Agents Tammy Lee and Graham Coder are back. They aren't here to arrest him. He's already serving 5 consecutive life sentences. They're here for the one thing the families still don't have. The truth. They don't start with questions. They talk about the weather. About prison food. About nothing. Because Tammy Lee knows something fundamental about Chris Watts, something she knew in that interrogation room and knows now. He will do anything to be liked. So they let him feel liked. And then they ask about that morning. The shadow confession, the lie that Shanann had hurt the girls, finally collapses. And Chris starts talking. He tells them about loading Shanann into the truck. He tells them about waking the girls. He tells them about driving. Imagine that drive. 45 minutes. The sun bleeding orange over the Colorado plains. Chris behind the wheel. Shanann in the cargo bed, wrapped in a sheet. And in the back seat, Bella. Cece. Holding each other. Leaning, without knowing it, against their mother's body. Bella looked up at him at some point during the drive and asked, "Is Mommy okay?" Chris just kept driving. When he got to the oil site, Survey 319, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave. Not deep enough to protect her. Just deep enough to hide her. And then he went back for the girls. He told the agents that Celeste went first. A blue blanket. He didn't look her in the eye. And then he went back for Bella. Bella, who was 4 years old. Bella, who had just seen what happened to her little sister. Bella, who looked at her father, the man who tucked her in, who posted photos of her with heart emojis, who called her his whole world. And asked, "Is the same thing gonna happen to me?" Her last words were, "Daddy, no." He dropped both girls into oil batteries through 8-inch hatches. He thought the crude oil would dissolve the evidence. Instead, it preserved them. There was no crime of passion here. No heat of the moment. No snap. There was a man who decided, quietly, methodically, that a fresh start with his mistress was worth more than the lives of 3 people who trusted him completely. That's not rage. That's calculation. And the most chilling part of the prison interview? Chris Watts still has photos of them in his cell. He says he prays to them. He says he talks to them. He still thinks he's their father. We look for monsters under the bed. We look for them in dark alleys, in mugshots, in the faces of people we'd never let into our lives. We want them to be obvious. Because if monsters are obvious, then we're safe. But Chris Watts fixed the neighbor's fence. He waved from the driveway. He wore "Best Dad" t-shirts and posted photos of his daughters on Instagram. And one August morning, he drove 45 minutes with his dead wife and his living children, and the sun coming up like the world had no idea. Because sometimes, the monster is the one who tucks you in at night. If you made it here, you already know what to do. Subscribe to the Unsolved Archives and I'll see you in the next one.